I think it used to be, legend has it, quote unquote legend, because I don't know how much of it is legend or just bullshit, but I think it used to be like a prison or some sort of asylum way back in the day. So it's like a really big property with a lot of land. And then it was eventually converted into a high school. But yeah, that's the shot from above that you see of the school that Peter Parker goes to is Franklin K. Lane. Fun fact. What up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to the Spun Today Podcast, the only podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 206 of the Spun Today Podcast, and in this episode, I speak about watching the movies The Batman and Spider-Man No Way Home. I also speak about watching Jerrod Carmichael's latest comedy special, Rothaniel, Bill Maher's latest comedy special, #Adulting, and getting to see Jo Koy live at UBS Arena in Long Island, New York. Stick around for all that good stuff, but before we get into the episode, please take a moment to listen to a way that you can help support the Spun Today podcast. Your support means a ton, and it helps me to be able to do more of what I love, which is more writing, more podcasting, and creating more content. For you, my very much so appreciated listeners. Here's a quick way that you can help support the show. You can support the Spun Today podcast by checking out my writing. You can go to spuntoday.com/free writing and check out some of my free association writing, which is intended to be some cathartic free writing, but oftentimes doubles down as motivation for myself and others. At spuntoday.com/short stories, you can read a bunch of the different short stories that I've written and actually listen to the audiobook versions of those short stories there as well. Another way you can help support my writing is by going to spuntoday.com/books and checking out what I have in store for sale. Digital copies are available in all formats, whether it be Kindle, iBooks, or a different type of e-reader. You can also purchase paperback copies if that's your preferred reading method. Currently available, I have my nonfiction, Make Way for You, which is a collection of freely written thoughts that were curated and put together as tips for getting out of your own way. Also available is my debut time travel novel titled FRACTAL. Again, go to spuntoday.com/books to show your support. The Batman was written by Matt Reeves, who's also the director, and Peter Craig, based on the iconic character created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane. And here is the official synopsis. When the Riddler, a sadistic serial killer, begins murdering key political figures in Gotham, Batman is forced to investigate the city's hidden corruption and question his family's involvement. Now, just so my listeners know where I stand in terms of like my favorite Batman and movies within the Batman franchise, I'd say that Michael Keaton is the GOAT, but I understand that that's a result of a possible bias of me being an 80s baby and him just being the first Batman that I saw, aside from, the Adam West TV show Batman, but he was the first Batman that I saw in terms of a movie and, in Batman, the original, and Batman Returns. But I just thought he was, one, the perfect Bruce Wayne and a great Batman. So just in terms of best bang for your buck on those two sides of the character, I think you get that with Michael Keaton. Speaking of which, I'm really excited that DC has gone the route of the extended universe and like this multiverse, following the footsteps of Marvel with the multiverse thing, which allows for different movies and different characters, different actors playing the same characters, and just different storylines that are completely unrelated. Some could overlap, some don't necessarily have to, and it's a great way to kind of explain away and allow for inconsistencies while creating stories that can exist within their own bubble, within their own vacuum. And we get to see amazing movies like The Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix one, alongside and separate from like all the classics, right? Now, in terms of Batman films, Batman movies, I would say the Dark Knight trilogy is by far the best. And I definitely don't think that that's an unpopular opinion, so I'm not going to qualify that one much. And Christian Bale, in my opinion, does a good job as Bruce Wayne. Also a good job as Batman. I hate that like fake voice shit that like always throws me off and has. But in terms of like story and characters, and like Heath Ledger's Joker, Tom Hardy's Bane, I mean, you just can't get better. Now that said, I'd say that The Batman was really good. I definitely enjoyed it. It was a different take on the character on both Batman and Bruce Wayne, which again, this extended universe allows for, right? Which is what I enjoy. I enjoy that creativity of it, or that aspect of it rather. And we see, instead of the usual billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne, who's always in the limelight, everybody loves, we see this version played by Robert Pattinson, who did a really good job, I thought, of a recluse, an introverted, weird, didn't want to be in the limelight version of Bruce Wayne. So it takes a little getting used to from that aspect, because, you know, it's not the, you know, gregarious type of character that we're used to seeing in Bruce Wayne. But I liked it. I like that, like, bend. And it kind of went more with the story of, you know, this kid who gets, his parents get murdered in front of him, at least in terms of like that origin story, at a very young age, grows up with his butler as his guardian. You know, even being a billionaire, you can definitely see a path where he becomes that weird, awkward recluse versus the limelight seeking billionaire. So it's definitely cool to see Matt Reeves and Peter Craig play with that a bit. And in terms of Batman, I thought Robert Pattinson exceeded my expectations. Like, he looked the part. Definitely has like that like chiseled jawline thing going on that lends itself to the Batman, you know, mask and outfit and shit. He didn't have that like fake voice. You know, he seemingly, you know, disguised his voice a bit, but just like in a more natural sense, versus the, I think it was like a strip of something that was put on Bruce Wayne's neck by his like Adam's apple that would literally alter his voice or something like that, which I didn't like from the Dark Knight trilogy, but we didn't have that here. And the movie takes place in circa 2004, and it's 2 years after Bruce Wayne developed the Batman. And the movie definitely had a darkness to it, a gritty feel, which was similar to the Dark Knight trilogy, but it was way darker. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that part of the reasoning for that is that the source material that was used, which is this called Year One, written by Frank Miller, and The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb, which are darker versions of Batman, at least within those comics. And my understanding is that the Batman used these as a primary like source material, similarly the Dark Knight trilogy does as well. And I could be off on that, but I think that may be reason for the similarity that I'm picking up between the two. So since it takes place within like 2 years of him becoming Batman, he's not like as advanced, you know, he's not the omnipotent presence that we're used to with a gadget for every single scenario. So in that sense, he's kind of like growing into that role of becoming that level of Batman that we're all used to. But now in this movie, we see him getting hurt more. You know, he definitely still has gadgets, you know, he's a billionaire and is kind of like laser focused on this vigilante justice thing that is the Batman and seemingly obsessed with it. But we can tell that he doesn't have everything worked out just yet, which was cool to see as well. It definitely gave the movie a more like realistic feel, a realistic tone. Even his car, the Batmobile, is kind of like a souped up muscle car, as opposed to being like a fucking spaceship on wheels like all the other Batmobiles that we've seen. And it helps that it takes place in 2004-ish, where the technology use in the movie had to account for that time period. Another aspect that I liked, which I don't know if it was like direct reference to one of the comics or if it was just a result of creative license, was this idea of the Wayne family not having this altruistic, benevolent history and being completely squeaky clean, which I felt like the Joker movie also played with a little bit, with Bruce Wayne's dad possibly having an affair with a woman and the Joker being the illegitimate son of that relationship. In the Batman, they detailed it as the Wayne family and the Arkham family being like the founding families of Gotham, you know, like the fucking Rockefellers and Vanderbilts of that world, which is cool because you always hear of Arkham Asylum as, you know, like the mental institution within this world, but never really thought, I at least never really thought of like the Arkham family, or, you know, what the institution is or who the institution is named after. So they made it again as like the Wayne and the Arkham families being the founding families of Gotham, but that the Wayne family in particular had this checkered past where Bruce Wayne's grandmother did a murder-suicide, killing her husband and then herself, a la Phil Hartman's wife. And then their daughter, Bruce Wayne's mother, went a little nutty behind that, understandably so, and was committed to Arkham Asylum, which was something that Bruce Wayne's father, Thomas Wayne, went to great lengths to cover up. And there was a reporter that began uncovering this. Bruce Wayne tried to like pay him off because he was like running for mayor at the time, didn't want any like negative press. The reporter was relentless, you know, he was still going to come out with the story. Shout out to journalistic integrity, right? But then Thomas Wayne went to Carmine Falcone, played by the amazing John Turturro, by the way, and asked him to essentially scare this reporter into not coming out with any of those stories. Carmine Falcone apparently took that upon himself to whack the reporter, not just scare him. And it was interesting to, you know, one, see that like checkered past kind of reinforce the fact that Bruce Wayne's like this troubled soul who doesn't really know who he is and is trying to find himself, and held his parents and his father in particular like on this high pedestal, and then finding out this negative shit about him, making him realize that his dad was also a flawed individual like the rest of us. And now the Riddler, played by Paul Dano, who did an amazing job, by the way. I really, really enjoyed the character of the Riddler. I always have. The only time I've ever seen him played before was Jim Carrey's version. And that, the whole movie, the Batman Forever, I think it was, where George Clooney played Batman. Which George Clooney, by the way, he was a shit Batman, but a great Bruce Wayne, I thought. At least that, like, life of the party, you know, version of Bruce Wayne, Playboy. But that whole movie was, like, corny and more, like, comedic, and I don't know, it was like over the top. And Jim Carrey, of course, did a great job, but played the Riddler in that like wacky kind of the Frank Gorshin version of the Riddler, like from the Adam West Batman series. This version of the Riddler, again played by Paul Dano, did a great job of this super smart, psychotic serial killer loner character. It's kind of reminiscent of like one of those like troubled teen white boy school shooters, like those like loner types that really just want some acceptance and some community and like seek it in unorthodox ways, like online, as they portrayed in this movie. And he had like on an obscure message board a following of a couple hundred lunatics. But his character, which is the main antagonist of the movie, was on a mission to uncover all these quote unquote lies of the origins of Gotham itself. And he started off by, as I detailed in the synopsis, killing key political figures and corrupt politicians and cops, and luring Batman to come after him so that he can uncover these stories of the Wayne family and its checkered past. And that's how Bruce Wayne himself came to learn about these things. So it's definitely a really interesting storyline there. Another great character was Selina Kyle / Catwoman, played by Zoe Kravitz. She did great. She's one of the, you know, like there's certain actors or actresses that play a role and it like fits them like a glove. Like for me, like in terms of Catwoman, Michelle Pfeiffer is like the number one. She was like born for that role, in my opinion. And since then, I don't think anyone has done that role justice. The closest, I'd say maybe Halle Berry, but that's more me being biased towards, you know, Halle Berry being dope. But Zoe Kravitz, I think, is like the closest to that, especially like within this version of Selina Kyle and Catwoman, this more gritty, grungy, early 2000s era. I thought she was great, and she kind of like layered the character in just making you interested in her as Selina Kyle, not just based on the fact that she was Catwoman, but she just made that Selina Kyle character interesting. Alfred, played by Andy Serkis, I thought they did a great job with as well. And Alfred kind of goes through like different iterations, right? Like the keeper of all Batman / Bruce Wayne's secrets, to his confidant, to his right hand. I kind of like that this one they were more distant, it seemed, Alfred and Bruce Wayne. They made a point of, or at least I felt this way, I'm not making it seem like too much like that father-son type of dynamic. And there was an actual scene where Bruce Wayne tells him, you're not my father. And he's like, I'm well aware. And I felt that was important to play up the fact that Alfred was Bruce's father's, butler, but longtime friend and confidant. And he was kind of like looking after Bruce afterwards, obviously, being his guardian and all. But that his allegiance is really to Thomas Wayne, because it gave more, I guess, like credence or more weight to his descriptions of what happened with that like Wayne legacy. And when Bruce confronted him saying, oh, you lied to me, I found all this stuff out about my dad and you never told me about any of it, the fact that Alfred was doing it more so to protect Thomas Wayne versus Bruce Wayne, it gave that fact like more credibility in my opinion. Now, 2 more characters that I'll mention that definitely stood out to me is Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin, played by Colin Farrell, which I would have never known if I would have never looked this up, if I would have never, been into like who played who in the movie. Colin Farrell played the Penguin. Shout out to the makeup artist, makeup and design. He looks nothing like Colin Farrell. He looks nothing like himself at all, and did such a phenomenal job, I thought, with this character. Like, so much so that I feel like he could be like his own like spin-off, or definitely, in a sequel to the Batman, play a larger role, as they kind of hint at towards the end with there being a power vacuum and now there's going to be a power grab in the underworld. Yeah, I could definitely see him coming back and playing a much larger role in a sequel. And I like this character in particular because they didn't make him like Danny DeVito's Penguin, which was great, by the way, in Batman Returns, but it was like much more comic booky, right? Like he was born with this weird deformity that he had actual like flippers and shit. But the Colin Farrell Penguin was again true to the realistic kind of through line of this movie. Was just like a drug dealing underboss who owned a club where a lot of like crooked and nefarious characters would frequent, and kind of like a scarred up deformed face, but was like an actual person, with ties to organized crime. And that just made him as a character much more easily digestible, in my opinion. Jeffrey Wright played Lieutenant James Gordon. Again, did a great job. But it's like Jeffrey Wright can't do anything wrong. You know what I mean? Like, he's such a great actor. Even though he's not my favorite Lieutenant Gordon, my favorite is actually the one from The Dark Knight. But even still, Jeffrey Wright did a phenomenal job with that role. He was believable as a good cop, good police, as they would say in The Wire, that was trying to work and operate within a cesspool of corruption. The last thing I'd say, which is something that I didn't like, is that I didn't like that there was no post-credit scene, which fucking sucks. And this is a note to all the comic book movie making folks in the world. Marvel has spoiled us to the point that now there's usually, like, within Marvel movies, 2 post-credit scenes. It's like a mid-credit post-credit scene and then a post-credit scene. And I, for one, have become accustomed to that shit. And I want to see my post-credit scene. So it's like that this movie did not have it. But what it did have was a deleted scene. If you watch it on HBO Max, where the Batman is currently now streaming, you can definitely see a deleted scene with the Joker, which is about like 5 or 6 minutes long, which would have made for a dope post-credit scene. I wonder if they did that in the movie theater, if they used that as a post-credit scene, but if not, they should have. The Joker was played by Barry Keoghan, who is this Irish actor that was in the Eternals Marvel movie. And shout out again to makeup and design. I don't know exactly what you call them, the makeup artist, because he looked incredible, looked absolutely nothing like him. They gave him a more gory kind of all fucked up like stitches and cuts and all over his face and his head. And it was reminiscent to at least like one of the origin stories of the Joker, where he fell like in a vat of acid, which is what like changed his skin color and stuff like that. But his face was all cut up and just a disturbed, creepy looking version of the Joker. Like Heath Ledger-ish in terms of like the scarring with like the smile on his face and shit, but just like a shitload more like scarring and deformity and missing hair, patches of hair on his head. And in the deleted scene, Batman goes to visit him at Arkham because he's an inmate there, and they're behind the glass, And Batman goes to him for help to try to find out who the Riddler is, to show him the Riddler's file and see, what he thinks of it. And it's definitely an interesting scene that looks to, build up future sequels to this version of the Batman. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see that character fleshed out a bit more as well. And that, folks, is my little recap and review of The Batman, released in 2022 and streaming now on HBO Max. Definitely check it out. Spider-Man: No Way Home was written by Chris McKenna and Eric Summers, and it's based on the character created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. And here's the official synopsis. With Spider-Man's identity now revealed, Peter asks Doctor Strange for help. When a spell goes wrong, dangerous foes from other worlds start to appear, forcing Peter to discover what it truly means to be Spider-Man. Now, within the Spider-Man world, I'd say, and this is probably, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion, but I'm a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man guy. I don't know if it's for nostalgic reasons or if it was, again, him being the first one in like this new age of, big Marvel superhero movies, but just that like nerdy underdog Peter Parker character who knocked out the park. And Spider-Man, not so much, but since he's like completely, masked and has a suit from top to bottom, from head to toe, I feel like you're like less reliant on Tobey Maguire himself to portray Spider-Man. Whereas like a Batman who's like half masked or a Superman, you like see the actual actor more. But that said, Tom Holland is an extremely close second, definitely the best since Tobey Maguire, and probably better if I was being objective, but he's so fucking good at the role. And Andrew Garfield, I thought was good as well. I wasn't mad at it, but Tom Holland definitely takes the cake. Oh, and something that I loved in this movie that I actually forgot to mention in my little recap and review of The Batman is something that if you're not a New Yorker, i.e. you don't live in New York, and if you don't have Spectrum cable, and if you don't watch New York 1, this won't mean anything to you. But I loved seeing, and a lot of like superhero movies and movies in general use them, but the New York 1 news anchors within Spider-Man, similar to the Batman. And I've seen them in movies like Bright, the Will Smith movie. You just see them all the time, and it's like dope to see because I watch New York 1 all the time, and it's like, oh shit, look, it's Annika, or look, it's Pat Kiernan, etc., etc. So that's pretty cool to see. Also, speaking of New York, and the fact that Spider-Man is from Queens, shout out to Queens, the best borough. As Spider-Man's school, they use, at least from the outside, like the view of it, they use Franklin K. Lane, which I don't live too far from. And it was actually my zoned high school back in the day, and I thankfully didn't have to go to it because it was like the quote-unquote bad high school. I think it's been like cleaned up and better now, but it got so bad that they had to like break it down into 4 different schools within one. I think like 4 different charters, or not sure exactly how that works, but yeah, it was like the school that as a junior high school kid going into high school, you definitely avoided going to. Definitely had a bad reputation, but it's cool to see. It's like, I think it used to be, legend has it, quote unquote legend, because I don't know how much of it is legend or just bullshit, but I think it used to be like a prison or some sort of asylum way back in the day. So it's like a really big property with a lot of land, and then it was eventually converted into high school. But yeah, that's the shot from above that you see of the school that Peter Parker goes to is Franklin K. Lane. Fun fact. And they did a good job of, I guess, like covering the J train. Like they show the train, but kind of cover the fact that it's like the J train station or whatever. Now, something I'd say about the Marvel multiverse movies, and it's weird because it took Zack Snyder's cut of the DC the Snyder cut of the Justice League for me to be able to conceptualize this, but I couldn't wrap my head around the whole multiverse concept and like the extended Marvel universe. Even with, I know like the Doctor Strange movie like set this up, and even that cartoon Spider-Man movie, the Into the Spider-Verse, which was good, played around with this concept and idea of there being a multiverse, multiple universes. But yeah, it took for some reason, for me, it like hit me like a ton of bricks for me to like get it. and wrap my head around it, it took that Justice League movie for it to make sense to me. And then now I get it. It's basically, you have multiple universes. And again, that's why you can have a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, an Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, a Tom Holland Spider-Man, all these different characters with, one of them has Mary Jane as a girlfriend. One of them has the MJ played by Zendaya, but the MJ stands for something else. And you have like different bad guys and sometimes different characters playing the same bad guy. And it's just like a multiverse, which is ultimately like the concept of there being an infinite number of realities going on simultaneously, to the point that somewhere out there in the universe, there is another version of Tony wearing the exact same shirt that I'm wearing now, recording the exact same podcast that I'm recording now. But in that Tony's universe, instead of it being the Spun Today podcast, it's the Spun Yesterday podcast or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it could be like little changes like that, or that Tony could be black, or that Tony could be single, or he could have 3 kids instead of 2, and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know why I couldn't get it before. Like, I was trying to reconcile the fact, wait, but how does this work? If Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, how could this guy also be Spider-Man? And, it's still the same time period, and but that explains it all, right? And this movie was kind of like the culmination of that concept, because it shows with Doctor Strange's fucked up spell, or when the spell got fucked up, how the different timelines intertwined, which is why we got to see Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker / Spider-Man. We got to see Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, all coexisting at the same time, which is cool for nostalgic purposes, but made for a really dope movie. And we got to see throwback villains, which were great, like Electro, which was Jamie Foxx's character, the Green Goblin by Willem Dafoe, Dr. Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina. So this movie did a great job of bringing all those worlds together and just underscoring that multiverse fact, underscoring the existence of that multiverse. And I thought that was really cool. And it kind of sucked that in the previous Spider-Mans with Tom Holland, it was kind of cool that his best friend and Aunt May, played by Marissa Tomei, his best friend Ned, played by Jacob Batalon, and his girl MJ, played by Zendaya, like, they all knew who Spider-Man was. But then when everybody found out who he was, it started causing issues for his loved ones. And him, trying to be like the good guy and like making all that right, went to Doctor Strange, as I said in the synopsis, to, cast his spell so that nobody knew who he was again. But then like mid-spell, he was like, oh wait, but I still want my girl to know, I still want my best friend to know, I still want May to know, et cetera, et cetera. And that like fucked everything up and caused the convergence of the multiverse. And ultimately, to make it all right, spoiler alert, he had to be okay with the anonymity again, with creating a spell where nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew who Spider-Man was. Nobody knew even Peter Parker was, essentially. So his girl, his best friend, they ultimately become strangers to him. And it was sad because he kind of like had it all, pre this movie, with those loved ones, like the closest people to him knew that aspect of him. He was able to share that and be open with them, which was dissimilar from, most superheroes and previous iterations of Spider-Man, but in a very Butterfly Effect-esque kind of way. It's like when he had it all, everybody else in his life was miserable. And in order to make them not miserable, he had to not have it all. And he essentially had to become miserable. Although the selflessness of the Spider-Man character allows him to be okay with that as long as his loved ones are okay. Spider-Man's such a dope character in that way. And one of the movies that I really liked that I feel was underrated, and I actually haven't seen the second one. I think there's a part 2. But the first Venom movie, the Tom Hardy Venom, this whole expanded universe thing now allows for, overlaps there. And in the post-credit scene, shout out to post-credit scenes, there's a scene where the Tom Hardy Venom essentially says that he has to go to where Spider-Man's at and meet Spider-Man. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Spider-Man No Way Home. Check it out. Jerrod Carmichael, Rothaniel, is his latest stand-up comedy special, released in 2022 and is available on HBO Max. This is his third HBO stand-up comedy special. He filmed it in February of 2022 before a live audience at the legendary Blue Note Jazz Club in New York City. I didn't know that. I just read that. It was written and performed by Jerrod Carmichael and directed by Bo Burnham. I think Jerrod Carmichael is dope. I've enjoyed his previous specials. The Carmichael Show, which was only, I want to say 2 seasons, may have been 1, but I think 2. Then he decided to step away from it. I felt like that show was great, and it had a potential to be like a really, really good introspective type sitcom. And I was definitely bummed out when he decided to step away from it. Now, from the beginning, his new special came off as very artistic. This is why I was like, oh, that makes sense now. Because he had jazz playing in the background, and in the beginning, you see like different streets in New York City, and the snow falling, and it's him, but you don't know it's him, making his way to the Blue Note Jazz Club. And you just see like light flurries and snow falling, and it's with these nice visuals of different New York City streets in the dusk with jazz music playing in the background. And then you realize it's him when he walks into the club and takes off his jacket, hands it off to someone who's waiting there for him, and then makes his way to the stage. And the way it's shot, just like visually, like a nice blue lighting, and the club felt intimate. And the way it was shot, it felt, me as a viewer watching it from home, like actually felt like I was in the club, if that makes any sense. Because normally like specials are in like a theater setting, sometimes like even in like arena setting or like a big theater, or even when it's in an intimate room, you kind of get like a wide shot, I feel, of like the audience, and you feel like somebody watching it on TV that's watching an audience that's watching the stage. With this one though, and I'm not sure what it was that Bo Burnham did exactly, if it was like all the close-ups or what it was, but I just felt like I was in the audience. Plus the audience felt like a small room. Like I have no idea what the size of it is, the Blue Note Jazz Club, but it did not feel like a big room. And it helped for this Jerrod's style of comedy, and specifically with this set, because it was a very introspective, intimate special. It was funny because Jerrod is a funny comic in my opinion, but like the genre of this was definitely, it wasn't like over the top funny, it wasn't silly funny, it wasn't political funny. It was much more introspective, here's my human experience type of funny. And I definitely appreciate that. And the way it was shot, again, definitely lends itself to that. It was reminiscent of, and you guys can go back and listen to this, Neil Brennan's special, Unacceptable, which I saw live. And I broke down during episode 197 of the Spun Today Podcast, in case you guys want to go back and reference. But like I would put that and this like within the same genre, if that makes sense. Like it was definitely funny in moments, but I feel like there was more of an emotional weight to it. And there was a theme within this special of living with secrets. And Jerrod details how growing up he knew and found out, it was like first in his family kind of to find out that his father was cheating on his mother, and his mother was actually like the side piece, quote unquote, family, and his father had like this whole other family in life, and living with that secret as a kid, and then eventually like forcing his father to tell his mother, which he knew would break his mom's heart. And he starts off the special with telling us that he has a secret because that he's never told us, his audience, before, in that his first name he never shares. Everybody always thought his name was Jerrod Carmichael, but Jerrod is actually his second name. And in this special, he was just like putting it all out there and sharing all his secrets, that being one of them, which is why the special is titled Rothaniel, because that's actually his first name. And it's something that he name that he was like always ashamed of. And even he says like back in high school, he used to pay off the people that put together the yearbook to like take off his legal first name and just use Jerrod. And Rothaniel was a combination of his father's name and his mother's father's name. So it is both his grandparents on either side. It was a combination of both their names, Rothaniel. And then the big quote unquote bombshell is that in this special, he comes out as gay. And he just details his like struggles of, you know, coming from a religious black family, growing up in the hood, being in entertainment, and, you know, all things that don't lend itself too well to being gay and his struggles of hiding it from his friends, his family, until this point in time, leading up to the special where he started coming out to friends and family and eventually to us and by us, I mean his, fans, his audience in this HBO special. And it's definitely a tough thing to do, it seems like, right? Like you never hear stories of, or at least I don't, of, coming out the closet was so easy. And, it's always like a harrowing, hard thing for folks to do, which sucks. Just like feeling as if you have to live that lie. And I say, feeling as if you have to live that lie, coming from the type of, or at least my mentality of, I am who I am, take it or leave it. If you're not cool with that and you've been my friend for 20 years, then fuck you, cut off the cancer type of mentality. But I understand that that's not everybody's demeanor. I don't even know if it would be my demeanor if I were in that situation. And he even touches on it. He was like, how do you reconcile the fact, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit, but how do you reconcile the fact of, as you grow, as you evolve, sometimes you have to, cut people out of your life. But how do you reconcile that when that person is your mother, or when that person is your brother, or when that person is, a loved one? And as a long-time Jerrod Carmichael fan, I definitely feel for him. Seems to be in a happier place, a freer place. I've seen him since host SNL and, joke around about it. And I'm definitely happy for him. And just kind of sucks that it's something that he had to wrestle with and go through for all these years. Now, two things that I want to highlight from the special as well. I loved how descriptive it was. How, just like from a writing perspective, I like detail. And I like how he was telling us he was going through a bit of how when he found his dad's porn stash, and he described precisely how it was like in a closet, in a Nike box on the left-hand side between a jar of nickels and his dad's gun. And just like you could like visualize that closet and that room, and how he mentioned that the tape was actually of his parents fucking, and it took him a minute to recognize the room, and he was like, hey, I know those sheets, they had pineapples on them. But yeah, I definitely appreciate that descriptive level of detail, and something dope that Jerrod has always been able to do, in my opinion, even though it's obviously a set, that's rehearsed to a certain extent. Obviously, it's a taping of a HBO special, but he has the ability to be very conversational. Everything just comes off as like natural and like in the moment. And I think that takes a certain type of comic to be able to pull that off. So, hats off and kudos to him. And that was all compounded by the fact that he made the setting such that he allowed for not heckling, but like the crowd jumped in and asked questions throughout the taping, which was interesting and definitely lent itself to the in the momentness of the feel of the special. But yeah, man, it was definitely a dope special. I recommend it. You guys should definitely check it out. Jerrod Carmichael, Rothaniel, streaming now on HBO Max. Check it out. Bill Maher's latest comedy special, Adulting, filmed at Miami's Fillmore Theater, written and executive produced and performed obviously by Bill Maher, and directed by Ryan Polito. My brother put me onto this one. Shout out to David, Spun Today alum, and told me it was worth a watch. I personally have been a fan of Bill Maher's for a long time. I think even back to the politically incorrect days, but definitely with Real Time with Bill Maher. I've gotten a couple of his New Rules books, which is a segment on the show. I did fall off from watching his show a bit. Like I used to watch, not religiously, but very often. I fell off a bit, but as of late, I have been like revisiting, watching either like the interview segment, some of the panel discussions. Definitely his like New Rules and his wrap-ups are amongst my favorites. And as of late, he's been on a tear, Bill Maher. And something I appreciate, and I've always appreciated about Bill Maher, is that he's a liberal, as am I, but he's not one of these Democrats that believe that anyone within the Democratic Party can do no wrong, and that it's blasphemous to say so if someone does, and that everyone on the other side is the devil. He doesn't think that way. He criticizes his own party, as his right to do so when warranted, and I know gets a lot of flack and shit for it. He is not afraid to reach to the other side of the aisle, frequently has conservatives on his panel, opposing viewpoints, goes on other conservative shows, for example, like fairly recently he was on the Ben Shapiro show, which I like as well, although obviously don't believe with a lot of his views. But he's always embodied that spirit of open conversation, dialogue, and not just othering people, saying, oh, you believe that? So forget you, you're not even worth the conversation. And I think we're seeing the logical conclusion of that type of mentality play out in large part in society today with how divided we are, especially politically, and how people's political views have divided friendships and even families. Extremely and unnecessary polarizing. It's okay to have opposite viewpoints on anything, folks. It really is. But yeah, so I always appreciated that about Bill Maher. And the special was good. It was entertaining. It was, if you're a Bill Maher fan, you're gonna get what you expect. I like how over time as well, he's kind of like doubled down on that sentiment, that spirit of being self-critical of his own party when so many people have gone the opposite route, like that woke route of we can do no wrong and the other side is so horrible that it doesn't matter what we do. And that's definitely refreshing to see. But he had some funny bits about one in particular is like rating Uber drivers. And he's like, now we're in a society where every single thing has to be planned out, which me, I'm a planner, guilty. But he highlights like the downfalls of that within using this example of Uber. And he's like, now you're even asked if you want to have a quiet car or have a conversation with the Uber driver. And he's like, I don't know, why don't we just fucking wing it today? You know what I mean? Like, why does every single thing have to be planned? Much to my chagrin. And about rating each other. And he's like, so now I'm in a car with the Uber driver who is going to get a rating from me. I'm going to get a rating from him. I don't want to talk to him. He probably doesn't want to talk to me either. But we're forced to do so and posing as such just to get a good rating from either or. He was like, I don't want to be fucking rating him. I don't want to think of him after I get out the car. And he's like, I don't give a shit if you kill the next passenger that you pick up. It's none of my fucking business. And that's like a theme throughout the special of, just minding your business, which I'm definitely on for. To each his own, right? He pokes at millennials. And I like this line. He goes, I forget the exact build up to it, but he was like, we discovered that the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings and it's almost as sensitive as millennials are. Thought that was hilarious. Then he takes another poke at millennials. He was like, millennials complain so much about boomers, saying, you ruined the world. You ruined our, you left us a fucked up world. You ruined it for us. And he's like, the oldest millennials are like 40 years old now. You guys have been through like 5 election cycles. It's your world. Take it. You want it, fucking take it. And he was like, that's the problem with you millennials. You grew up stealing music and now you expect that everything should be free. You want it? You want the fucking world? Take it. He was highlighting also how this social media generation, the online generation, it's very much so faking your life. You know what I mean? He was like, nobody puts negative shit on Instagram really. It's always like the highlights of all the positive and all the good times and all the good stuff. But yeah, it was definitely a good special. It was worth the watch. Again, if you are a Bill Maher fan, you get what you expect, especially if you watch the show and his opening monologues and stuff like that. It's pretty much an extended version of that. He takes digs at religion like he always does. And, hats off to Bill Maher for staying true to who he is, especially, and even so after all these years and, being within the corporate HBO environment, but still being able to maintain his creative control and staying true to who he is. And actually, let me play for you guys the preview of the special.
Look, every generation is the what were you thinking generation. Doctors used to do cigarette ads. A lung surgeon needs steady hands. Have you noticed that Trump, unlike every other president, did not age in office? We did. Not that I would ever get work done, not for any moral reason. It's just, it doesn't work. Now you just look old and weird. We have to find our way back from not loathing each other. Facebook, Stop using it to argue with some kid you went to 3rd grade with about Brett Kavanaugh. People didn't used to talk politics all the time, and they had no idea how much they hated each other.
Bill Maher, his new special, #Adulting, is available now, streaming on HBO Max. Jo Koy and his Funny is Funny tour. We got to see him live. My wife Zoila, sister-in-law Yudi, and brother-in-law Raul, aka Rumi, all Spun Today alum. Shout out to them. We went on a double date to go see Jo Koy in Long Island, UBS Arena, which, by the way, was a lot closer to the crib than I thought. And I'm definitely looking forward to going there again. We had a great experience there. Like the staff, the personnel, the venue was cool. It was my first time there. And we got these tickets a few months ago. I want to say maybe like 4 or 5 months ago we bought it. So I like on an Instagram ad and we all decided to go. And it was for his Funny is Funny tour. Now, however, which I didn't know at the time, and we found out when we went to the show, the taping of the actual Funny is Funny hour special had already happened at this point, and this was kind of like an add-on show after the fact. And, most comics, after they finish touring an hour and after they film, they retire that material and start developing new material. So this was his first show after retiring all the material, which was really interesting to see, because one, you normally see things like that and in comics working on material in a comedy club setting. So it's cool to experience from which I've seen a bunch of other comics do that, every time I've been to a comedy club, just working on material, but never to this scale. Jo Koy is so huge at this point that although I know he still does like clubs and smaller theaters and to work on material, he was doing this at the scale of an arena, which was just masterful, especially in comparison to like his opener and his middle act, which are really good, really funny. But you see the different levels of him as the closer, this arena level act comic doing what he does, and not even with a full prepared set, just working on material and still commanding the attention of the crowd. And it was a great time for all of us. And it was mainly crowd work and seeing in real time how he's able to like use callbacks and reference somebody that I think the guy's name was like Hogan, and then he did like a Hulk Hogan joke and he kept like circling back to that guy like throughout the evening. And it was dope to see. And I'm definitely anticipating watching obviously the next special after the Funny is Funny. Well, one, I definitely want to see the Funny is Funny one to see, what I missed within like the rest of the tour of that hour, but also to see what from this first developing night is kept and evolved into future bits of his. Something else of note, which was dope, is something I never realized how important it was until going to see Jo Koy, but he had a DJ with him, DJ Turbulence, shout out to him, and he was just on stage DJing and playing music throughout the entire, before the show started. And then like in between the acts, he would call up from the opener to the middle act to Jo Koy, and then close out the show. But in the beginning, while people are, finding their seats and walking in and stuff like that, he was just DJing. So it was like a DJ show, and he was super good, played dope music. I don't know if I'm biased because he was playing like probably my favorite time period of music and genre, which was like late 90s, early 2000s hip hop and R&B. So it was playing Biggie and Jay-Z and 112. And I never realized how important that is to like setting the tone for the evening and getting everybody like amped to like watch the show. It was really cool. I really enjoyed that. And he also showed a preview to a movie that he has coming out in theaters, which looked pretty good. Definitely gonna check it out. Tiffany Haddish is in it. It seemed like not like a romantic comedy, but like it reminded me a little bit of Just Friends a little bit, which I guess was a romantic comedy, but just like the aspect of the person like moving away from home, becoming a kind of a big shot, but not really, and then coming back home. I don't know. Anyway, look for the trailer. It's called Easter Sunday. I'll actually see if I can link to it in the episode notes if I can find it. But he premiered like the trailer during this show, and that was pretty cool to see. And definitely shout out to Jo Koy. He's blown up like so huge. He's obviously an arena comic. He's on his 4th Netflix special. But if you're a fan of Jo Koy, you know his story. Like, he used to sell shoes at, not Macy's, I think it was like Nordstrom or something like that. And, you know, he was a comic for, I think, 15, 20 years or more. When he tried selling his first special he tried getting a special picked up by Netflix, and Netflix turned him away and said, you know, I don't think that, you know, folks will get it. What he decided to do at that point was self-fund it, as a lot of comics are doing now. And he was definitely a pioneer of that, self-fund it. So he paid for everything. He paid for the taping of his own special, you know, editing, pretty much handed Netflix over a final polished version of it and said, I know you guys said you didn't want to do a special with me, but please, you know, take another look. And they, you know, still said they weren't interested. And then they wound up like calling him back and saying, you know what, we're going to give it a shot. We're going to buy it from you. And the rest is history. He like blew up after that. He's now on he did a second, a third, and now going to be a fourth special with Netflix. Obviously the naysayers who were like, you know, nobody's going to get it. Nobody's going to get, you know, this Filipino heavy content. And he believed in his vision, believed in himself, believed in his creativity, produced the shit himself, and ultimately let the non-believers continue non-believing while he kept his head down, worked hard, and proved his vision right. Shout out to Jo Koy. Definitely had a dope time getting to see Jo Koy at the UBS Arena. And that, my friends, was episode 206 of the Spun Today Podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. I really, really do. I do not and will not ever take your time for granted. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to listen to my meanderings and thoughts. With that said, I want to wrap up the show with a few ways you can help support the Spun Today Podcast if you so choose. Your support allows me to free up time to record more episodes, think of creative ways to share this content with you. It allows me to do more of what I love to do, which is writing and trying to develop stories that we will all be able to one day look back on after I write that New York Times bestseller that gets optioned and made into a movie that we all get to go see and watch those iconic words flash on the screen based on the novel by Tony Ortiz, or based on the story by Tony Ortiz. And then we get to look back and be like, yo, I remember when he recorded a podcast episode about that story and told us about how it came to be and where the initial seeds of that idea came from. And now look at it. That's just going to be wild, right? Well, to get there from where I'm at now, I could definitely use your support. And here are a few different ways that you can do just that. Peace. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying this podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few quick ways you can help support this show. You can support the Spun Today podcast by going to spuntoday.com/support. There, you'll find my merch section, where you can cop the iconic Podcasts vs. Anybody t-shirt in a wide variety of different colors and all different sizes. Also, if you're into cycling, you can cop the super soft, comfortable, minimalist design Spun Today Bike Club t-shirt. Also available in a bunch of different colors in all different sizes. There are a few other designs of different types of t-shirts. Definitely go there and check it out. spuntoday.com/support. It's the merch section, where you can also get a dope coffee mug. I have coffee mugs with the brand new redesigned Spun Today logo on one side and the tagline that I end every show with on the other, which is start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. The mug is available in both black and white, because we don't discriminate here at the Spun Today Podcast. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support and check out the merch section. You can support the Spun Today Podcast by checking out my writing. You can go to spuntoday.com/free writing and check out some of my free association writing, which is intended to be some cathartic free writing, but oftentimes doubles down as motivation for myself and others. At spuntoday.com/short stories, you can read a bunch of the different short stories that I've written and actually listen to the audiobook versions of those short stories there as well. Another way you can help support my writing is by going to spuntoday.com/books and checking out what I have in store for sale. Digital copies are available in all formats, whether it be Kindle, iBooks, or a different type of e-reader. You can also purchase paperback copies if that's your preferred reading method. Currently available, I have my nonfiction, Make Way for You, which is a collection of freely written thoughts that were curated and put together as tips for getting out of your own way. Also available is my debut time travel novel titled FRACTAL. Again, go to spuntoday.com/books to show your support. Support the Spun Today podcast by following me on social at Spun Today on Twitter, at Spun Today on Instagram. Please also check out and like my Facebook page, facebook.com/Spun Today, and subscribe to my YouTube page as well. On my YouTube page, not only will you get these full-length episodes, but you'll also get to check out some chopped up clips and bonus content. To get to my YouTube page, just search Spun Today on YouTube or click on any of the YouTube icons on the footer of my website. Also, don't forget to rate and review this podcast wherever it is that you're listening. It really does help. The Spun Today newsletter is available to each and every one of my listeners absolutely for free. All you have to do is go to spuntoday.com/subscribe and drop in your email address. What I'm going to do is brighten up everybody's least favorite day of the week by delivering 5 curated things within my weekly newsletter every Monday at noon. You're going to receive a photo of the week, a recommended podcast of the week. I listen to tons of podcasts from an array of varied interests. I cherry pick the very best ones so that you can check them out. I also share a video of the week, which can be anything from a tasty recipe to a dope rap battle to an enlightening TED Talk. I also share a quote of the week. And finally, for my fellow wordsmiths out there, a word of the week so that you can step up your vocab. Again, this curated list is yours absolutely free by going to spuntoday.com/subscribe and dropping in your email address, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Again, go to spuntoday.com/subscribe, drop in your email address, and you'll get the very next one. If you want to help support the Spun Today podcast financially, you can do so by going to spuntoday.com/support. Here you'll find a few different ways that you can do so. You can shop on Amazon, but first go to my website, spuntoday.com/support, click on the Amazon banner, which will take you to Amazon's website where you do your shopping like you normally do. It will not cost you anything extra, but I will get credit for driving traffic to their website. Another cool way that you can help support this show is through Patreon, where you can set up reoccurring donations to my podcast, whether it be $1 per show, $2 per show, etc. And depending on how much you choose to pledge, you will receive some Patreon perks in return. Things like free writing pieces, free bookmarks, free digital copies of my books, etc. Again, my Patreon link can be found at spuntoday.com/support. You can also set up similar reoccurring payments via my Ko-fi page. And if you want to send a one-time happiness bomb donation, if you will, you can do so via my PayPal link. Again, all of which can be found at spuntoday.com/support. If you're a fellow creative, a cool way that you can help support the Spun Today podcast and actually be part of the podcast is by filling out my 5-question questionnaire located at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. Here you'll find 5 open questions related to your craft, your art, what inspires you to create, what type of unrelated hobbies you're into, and what motivates you to get your work done. You can choose to remain anonymous or plug your website and your work. And once you submit your questionnaire, I read your responses on a future episode of the Spun Today podcast. It's completely free at no cost to you. And what I like to say about it is that if your responses could potentially spark inspiration in someone else, why not share that? spuntoday.com/questionnaire. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.